My son-in-law announced the family ski trip at my own dinner table. Whistler, British Columbia. 10 days. Him, my daughter, his parents. We only budgeted for the 4 of us, he said, not even looking up from his phone. My daughter added quietly like she'd rehearsed it. We just need some space, Dad. You understand. I smiled. I said, Of course. Have a wonderful time. What none of them knew was that I'd owned the lodge they booked for the past 6 years. Before we go further, if you're new here, please subscribe and drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from. I set the roast on the table the way Miriam always did, low heat, for 4 hours. The kitchen smelling like a Sunday when Jennifer was 12 and used to drag her school projects in here to spread across the counter while I cooked. That Jennifer, gap-toothed, arguing about history homework, stealing bites of carrot from the pot. I'd have done anything for her. I still would. That's the part that makes this so hard to talk about. My son-in-law, Brendan, arrived the way he always does. Loud, his parents behind him. His father in a sport coat that probably cost more than my truck payment. His mother with that way she has of looking at a room and finding it wanting. They sat around the table I'd had for 30 years, and they made me feel like a tenant in my own home. Dinner started fine. I'd made Jennifer's favorite, the same pot roast. I'd even found a bottle of Okanagan Red I'd been saving, a 2017 from a small vineyard near Oliver that I'd toured with Miriam the year before she got sick. I brought it out carefully. Brendan picked it up, looked at the label, set it down without commenting, then reached past me to open the bottle of wine his mother had brought instead. He poured for everyone, skipped my glass entirely, put the bottle at his end of the table. Jennifer watched. She said nothing. So we've been planning a trip, Brendan said, grinning at his parents now. His father leaned in, already smiling. Whistler, 10 days over the holidays. Private lodge. Ski in, ski out. The whole thing. I had a forkful of roast halfway to my mouth. I set it down. That sounds wonderful. Which property? Ridgeland Retreat? You know it? I knew it. I knew the unit numbers and the maintenance schedule and the name of the woman who'd managed it for the last 4 years. I'd bought it in 2018 during a quiet period when mountain property in the sea to sky corridor was still undervalued. But I kept my expression neutral. I've heard of it. We budgeted for 4, Brendan continued. Me, Jen, Mom, and Dad. He gestured at his parents. It's really just meant to be immediate family. You know how it is, Robert. I'm not Robert to him. He knows my name is Gordon. He calls me Robert when he wants to make me feel small. I looked at Jennifer. She was looking at her plate. I could cover my own costs, I said. I'd love to spend the holidays together. It was Jennifer who answered. She didn't look up. We need a break, Dad. It's not personal. The words went somewhere quiet inside me. Not personal. 38 years of being her father. The nights in the children's hospital when she had pneumonia at 4. The 3 jobs I worked when Miriam was going to treatment. The mortgage I co-signed on their condo because Brendan's credit was still recovering from a failed business venture he'd never explained fully. Not personal. Of course, I said. I understand completely. I went to get dessert. I walked past the kitchen and up the stairs and sat on the edge of my bed and listened to the sound of Brendan pouring more wine, my wine, and his mother laughing at something he said. I didn't go back downstairs. After a while, the voices faded. Doors closed. They stayed over, because Brendan had had too much to drink. My wine. In my guest rooms. In my house. I sat in the dark a long time. Then I went to my office. The laptop on my desk is password protected. Jennifer has never asked about it. In 17 years of my owning properties across British Columbia and Alberta, my daughter has never once asked what I actually do with my time. She thinks I'm a retired facilities manager who lives carefully on pension and savings. She's not wrong about the pension. She doesn't know about the rest. I opened the screen. 4 properties. The Lodge in Whistler, Ridgeline Retreat, 8 units, managed through Harlow Holdings, Inc., named for the street where Miriam and I met, 41 years ago in Calgary. A cabin resort outside Canmore, Alberta. A small boutique inn in Tofino I'd acquired during the pandemic when the owners couldn't survive the lockdowns. A heritage bed and breakfast in Victoria, on the island. Total assessed value somewhere north of $4 million. I'd built this slowly, carefully, starting with the insurance money after Miriam died. Working double shifts, taking online courses in real estate investment at 58 years old, sitting at this same desk while Jennifer was busy with her new husband and her new life and her new family that didn't include her father at holidays. I opened a spreadsheet. $63,000. That's what I'd given them over 9 years. The down payment assistance when they bought their first place. The loan when Brendan's consulting business hit a wall. Temporary cash flow, he said, 4 years ago, and hasn't mentioned repayment since. The new furnace when their condo heating failed last January. Jennifer crying on the phone, Brendan silently present in the background. I'd sent an e-transfer that evening. $63,000, and they needed a break from me. I sat there until around 2 in the morning. Then a thought arrived. The way the important ones always do. Quietly, without fanfare. I pulled up the Harlow Holdings booking portal. There it was. Unit 6, Ridgeline Retreat. December 21st through December 31st. 10 nights. Morgan Whitfield party, 4 guests. Confirmed. Deposit paid. I stared at that reservation for a long time. Then I opened a new tab and started reading the British Columbia Innkeepers Act. Not for the first time. I know it fairly well. I didn't sleep. Around 5 in the morning, as the kitchen went quiet below and I heard Brendan and his parents moving around, I heard something else. Voices. Lower than they'd been at dinner. Jennifer's careful tone. The one she uses in negotiations. I'd heard it on a call once when she didn't know I was in the hall. I moved to the top of the stairs the way I had as a boy in our old house in Lethbridge, back when listening was something you did to stay safe. He's sitting on equity he doesn't use, Brendan was saying. This house alone, comparable sales on this street are going for $850, $900. He's in a 4-bedroom, by himself. He's stubborn, Jennifer said. Not unkindly, the way you'd say someone is stubborn about recycling. More efficient than that, if we frame it as simplifying. He doesn't need 4 bedrooms. We could find him something nice in a 55-plus community, somewhere with activities. Jennifer actually laughed. Small and private. He still wears the same blazer he wore to our wedding. He's not going to put up a fight about lifestyle. The blazer. Miriam picked it out. I wore it to Jennifer's university graduation. I wore it to her wedding, yes, and I've worn it since because it still fits, and because when I put it on I can sometimes still smell her perfume from that day, faintly, the way a memory sits in fabric. I went back to my office and sat down, and my hands did not shake. That surprised me too. I looked at the booking again. December 21st through 31st, Unit 6. I opened a new browser tab. Ridgeline Retreat was listed publicly as part of Harlow Holdings' portfolio, but the ownership structure wasn't immediately obvious from the surface. Jennifer had never looked. I'd never told her. It had never seemed necessary. Or perhaps I'd simply known, somewhere quiet, that keeping it separate was a form of protection I might one day need. I picked up my phone and called my property manager, a woman named Adele who'd been running Ridgeline Retreat since before I bought it. She picked up on the 4th ring, groggy. It was nearly 6 in the morning. Adele. I'm sorry to call so early. I need to discuss Unit 6. There was a pause. Then, because Adele has known me long enough to understand that early morning calls are not casual, what do you need? Ownership is transitioning some operational policies. I want to discuss room assignments and the updated rate structure before the Christmas block. Another pause. How updated? Significantly. I'll send you the details this morning. And Adele, there's a reservation in Unit 6 I need you to reassign. I'll explain when I send the documentation. I spent the rest of that morning on calls and emails, then drove downtown to see my lawyer, a woman named Christine who has never once asked me why I want to do something, only whether it's legal. It was legal. Ownership transitions in BC accommodations permit rate and room type modifications with proper written notice to guests. The notice window under the applicable regulations, 72 hours before check-in. You'll want to document everything, Christine said. Rates posted publicly. Notifications sent to the email and file. Dated confirmation of delivery. Already prepared. She studied me over her reading glasses. Personal matter. Operational restructuring. She didn't push. She filed the paperwork that afternoon. December 19th, Adele sent a notification email to Morgan Whitfield at their address on file. Rate adjustment effective December 21st due to ownership transition and operational restructuring. Room reassignment from Unit 6, the premium ski in ski out suite with mountain views, to Unit 2, a standard interior unit facing the access road. Compliant. Legal. Documented. I watched the read receipt come through at 9:47 in the evening. I drove home slowly, through streets starting to fill with Christmas lights. Miriam loved Christmas lights. Jennifer used to love them too. We drive through neighborhoods looking for the best displays. The three of us. Miriam keeping score in a little notebook. I still have the notebook somewhere. In the desk drawer, probably. I booked my flight to Vancouver for December 20th. December 20th was a Tuesday. I packed a single bag, drove to the airport, and flew into YVR. Took the Sea to Sky shuttle to Whistler, arrived in the early evening. The mountains were heavy with new snow, the kind of blue-gray dark that settles in the valley at 4 in the afternoon this time of year. I'd forgotten how much I liked it up here. Adele met me at the Ridgeline Retreat office. She's in her early 50s, efficient, slightly too direct for most people, and exactly right for me. They haven't canceled, she said, before I could ask. I didn't expect them to. Penalty clause on the deposit is non-refundable. They'd lose $1,200. They called yesterday about the room change. I handled it the way you asked. Ownership transition, operational reasons, no exceptions. How did they take it? The man on the call was unhappy. He raised his voice. I gave him the documentation reference number and wished him a pleasant stay. I smiled. Thank you, Adele. Should I know anything else about this reservation? I thought about it. The woman in the party is my daughter. Adele was quiet for a moment. Understood, she said finally. Then, I'll have the staff briefed before check-in tomorrow. I spent that evening reviewing operations. Ridgeline Retreat is a real business. 7 other families were booked over the holiday period, and they deserved proper service. I walked through each unit, checked the maintenance log, reviewed the supply inventory. The property was in good shape. Adele kept it well. I slept that night in the staff suite, a small room off the back of the main building, simple and warm. I was asleep before 9. I hadn't slept that well in months. December 21st. They arrived at 3 in the afternoon. I was in the small office behind the reception area when I heard the main door open. I gave it a moment, then walked out with a clipboard, reviewing what appeared to be an operational checklist. It was, in fact, a genuine maintenance schedule. I didn't have to perform busyness. I was busy. Brendan reached the front desk first. He had his credit card out before the desk attendant spoke. Whitfield, he said. Party of 4. We have Unit 6. The desk attendant, a young man named Owen, who Adele had briefed that morning, pulled up the reservation with careful neutrality. I have your reservation, Mr. Whitfield. There have been some modifications due to the recent ownership transition. If you'll just give me a moment. Modifications? Brendan's voice sharpened immediately. We confirmed this booking in August. Of course. The ownership change occurred on December 19th. Our team sent notification via email on that date. You're in Unit 2, 2nd floor, Mountain Access Road View. It's a comfortable, we booked a ski-in, ski-out suite with mountain views. I understand, and I apologize for any inconvenience. Get your manager. Owen looked up from his screen. That's when Brendan's father, standing slightly behind, put his hand on his son's arm and said, quietly, Brendan. I turned from the bulletin board I'd been standing near. Brendan's face went through 3 things in approximately 1 second. Confusion, recognition, fury. My daughter was standing with her mother-in-law near the entrance, both of them holding their coats. Jennifer saw me at the same moment Brendan did. Her face did something different. It went very still. Dad. Her voice came out small. What are you doing here? Working, I said. I own this property. The silence was specific, the kind of silence where a room rearranges itself. Brendan recovered first. He always does. This is a joke. You set this up. You followed us up here. I bought this lodge in 2018, I said. The paperwork is on file with the BC Land Title Office. You're welcome to verify. This is harassment, Brendan said. His voice was rising. Other guests in the small lobby were very still. A family near the fireplace had stopped looking at their phones. This is targeted harassment. I want the police called, Brendan. It was his father again. Harassment. It was his father again. The older man's face had gone careful, calculating. He was doing the math faster than his son was. This man followed us here. He manipulated our booking, sir. Owen, credit to him, kept his voice level. The ownership transition was properly filed, and notification was sent within the required window. I can print the documentation if you'd like to review it. Jennifer had not moved from near the entrance. She was looking at me with an expression I hadn't seen on her face since she was very young. Not anger, not embarrassment, but something more like the look she used to get when she'd broken something by accident. Not defiance. Recognition of her own hand in the damage, Brendan's father put his hand on his son's shoulder. We should see the room, he said quietly. We can discuss the rest later. Brendan turned back to the desk. His jaw was tight. Fine. What's the rate? Owen told him. The revised rate, as per the new operational structure Adele and I had filed, was 32% higher than the rate Brendan had booked under. Also compliant. Also notified. Brendan opened his mouth. Closed it. Took the keycards Owen set on the counter. Didn't speak to me again before he picked up his bag and walked toward the elevator. His mother followed, then his father, who paused beside me for a moment. We'd met 3 times. He'd never been overtly unkind. Gordon, he said, which was the first time he'd used my name. I nodded. He moved on. Jennifer was the last one. She stood there in her coat, a travel bag over one shoulder, and she looked at me the way she had in the hospital when she was 4 years old, and I'd sat beside her bed all night. The night she couldn't breathe well, and I'd been terrified, and hadn't shown it because she needed me to be calm. You own this place, she said. I own this place since 2018. Yes. She looked at the floor, then back at me. How many properties? We can talk about that another time. She nodded. Then she picked up her bag and followed her husband to the elevator. I stood in the lobby until the doors closed. Owen looked at me. I looked at the maintenance clipboard. Then I went back to the office and got to work. The next few days unfolded the way I'd understood they would. Unit 2 is a comfortable room. There is nothing wrong with it. The beds are good. The bathroom is clean. The heat works. The view is the access road and the parking structure, and, beyond that, the tree line. It is not Unit 6. Unit 6 has a private deck and unobstructed mountain views and direct ski run access, and costs $300 a night more for a reason. The first evening, Brendan came to the front desk about the Wi-Fi. Standard mountain connectivity, I explained through Owen. Stronger signal in the lounge and the common areas. He stood near the desk for a moment like he was waiting for me to appear. I was in the office. I let him wait. The second morning, his mother came to ask about a restaurant recommendation. Owen gave her 2, both excellent, both a 10-minute drive, because the lodge's own dining service during the transition period was limited to continental breakfast, a policy change Adele had implemented in keeping with new ownership's operational review. Also notified, also compliant. On December 23rd, Jennifer knocked on the office door. She came in without waiting for me to answer, which is something she's done since she was old enough to reach the handle. She sat in the chair across from me. She didn't say anything for a moment. I kept my pen in my hand, but I wasn't writing. How much? She said finally. Total. Over the years. $63,000, roughly. Not counting what I arranged, not money, calls I made, people I knew. She closed her eyes briefly. The job at Meridian. She'd gotten a position at a large engineering firm 4 years ago. She'd believed she'd networked her way in. I'd called a former colleague who knew the hiring director. I'd never told her. Yes. She opened her eyes. Dad, I heard you, I said. That morning. The two of you in the kitchen. The house. She went very still. The 4-bedroom, I said, the 55-plus community. The Blazer. The color came up in her face, not the flush of anger. The other kind. I've had the house put in a trust, I said. Independent legal advice, filed with the county. It's mine for as long as I'm living. No one can compel a sale. She looked at her hands in her lap. I didn't know he was going to say that. You laughed. She didn't argue. That was the part I hadn't expected, that she wouldn't argue. She sat there and she took it. Out of no, she said finally, very quietly, when I stopped being the person who would have told him that was wrong. I didn't have an answer for her. I've turned that question over many times since, and I still don't have one. People change inside marriages in ways they don't always notice until something makes them look directly at themselves. I've watched it happen to other people. I'd somehow not expected to watch it happen to Jennifer. He's been telling me for 3 years that you were controlling, she said, that the money was a way of keeping me dependent on you, that your generosity had strings. Did you believe that? She was quiet for a while. I wanted things to be simple. Brendan is simple in a way. He makes everything feel like it fits into a category. Either you're for us, or you're... She stopped. Against you. She nodded. What does he say now? I asked. About all of this. He says you're vindictive. That you manufactured a legal situation to humiliate us. What do you say? She looked at me for a long time. I say you gave us exactly what we asked for, a vacation without you. She paused. And that you were right to do it. I put down my pen. We didn't resolve anything that afternoon. I didn't offer comfort or money or reassurance. She needed to sit with what she'd allowed to grow between us. I needed her to understand that what she'd permitted in that dining room, watching a man pour my wine past my glass and saying nothing, had consequences. Not because I was keeping score, but because I had a self that deserved basic consideration. Something Brendan had spent 3 years quietly convincing her didn't apply to me. She left after about an hour. She looked lighter and heavier at the same time. That's how truth usually lands. December 27th. They checked out early. Brendan requested the final bill from Owen and stood at the desk for a long time when he saw the total. The 10-day stay at revised rates, plus dining charges, plus the resort access fee, came to just under $4,000, more than double what he'd budgeted for. His MasterCard went through. I saw his expression from across the lobby, and I understood he would spend several months recovering from this trip financially. I stayed in my office. His father stopped in the doorway on his way out. Gordon. He looked like he wanted to say something complicated and had decided against it. I hope you'll consider whether this was worth it. I consider everything, I said. That's always been my habit. He nodded slowly. His wife appeared behind him. They left. Jennifer was the last one out, the way she'd been the last one in. She stopped in front of me. She didn't have anything ready to say. Neither did I. We looked at each other in the way that parents and children sometimes do, across the distance of everything that has happened between them. I'm going to talk to someone, she said. A counselor. I've already made the appointment. Good. Can I call you? When I get back. Yes, I said. You can call me. She didn't hug me. I didn't reach for her either. Some things need to earn their way back. She picked up her bag and walked out into the cold December morning, snow coming down lightly. the way it does up here when it's not trying to prove anything. I stood at the window and watched their rental car pull out of the drive. Then I turned around and got back to work. I flew home the first week of January. My house was exactly as I'd left it. Dated curtains, good bones, Miriam's photograph on the hall table. A house I'd built a life in, that no one was going to take from me. Brendan called once. He didn't leave a message. I didn't call back. Jennifer called the following Sunday. We talked for 40 minutes, mostly about small things. She told me about the counselor, someone she'd found to her company's benefits, a woman who specialized in family systems. She said the first session had been hard. She said she was going back. I told her the Okanagan Vineyard had releases coming in the spring. I told her I'd get a couple of bottles if she wanted to try them sometime. She said she'd like that. The week after, I was in Victoria for a property review, and I walked past a cafe on Government Street and thought about calling her to say I was on the island. I didn't. Not yet. Some distances have to be crossed gradually, or not at all. I sat down with a coffee and looked out at the inner harbor. The lights going on in the early dark of January, ferries moving in the distance. I thought about what I'd spent the last 6 months doing, and whether I would do it again. I would, not because I enjoyed the damage. I hadn't enjoyed it. Not really, not the way people assume when they hear the word revenge. I'd done it because I'd needed to stop pretending that what happened at my own dinner table was acceptable. Because Miriam would have told me, long before it got this far, that dignity isn't vanity. That teaching someone the weight of their choices is an act of love, even when it doesn't look like it from the outside. Whether Jennifer would find her way back to being the person she'd been before Brendan convinced her otherwise, that wasn't mine to control. I'd done my part. The rest was hers. I finished my coffee. Left a good tip. Walked back along the waterfront toward the inn. Somewhere in the city, probably, there was a family sitting down to dinner, passing the wine, making plans. I hoped someone in that family was being seen. I hoped nobody was watching a bottle skip past their glass and deciding to say nothing. I hoped that very much. If any of this landed with you, leave a comment. I read all of them. And if you'd like to hear the next story, click the box on the left. I've thought a lot about what it actually means to let something go too far. Not the dramatic moments. Not Brendan skipping my wine glass at the table. Not my daughter laughing about my blazer in my own kitchen at 6 in the morning. Those were just the parts that finally made it impossible to look away. What I've thought about more is the quiet accumulation before all of that. The 100 small times I'd swallowed something and said nothing, because I wanted to keep the peace. Because I thought generosity would eventually be met with generosity. Because I told myself that patience was a virtue and distance wasn't permanent. It isn't virtue if it costs you your self-respect. I know that now in a way I only half knew before. What happened at Ridgeline Retreat wasn't something I planned the night Brendan announced the ski trip. It was something that became possible because of choices I'd made quietly over many years, working hard, building carefully, keeping my own counsel. Miriam used to say I was too private. She wasn't wrong. But that privacy turned out to matter, because when the people I loved most decided I wasn't worth including, I already had something they couldn't account for. Not money, not property. The habit of taking myself seriously. That's the thing nobody tells you about being underestimated. It has a cost, yes. It wears on you in ways you don't always notice until you're sitting on the edge of a bed at 2 in the morning listening to laughter coming through your own floorboards. But it also gives you time. Time to build. Time to think clearly without anyone watching. Time to understand that your value doesn't depend on whether the people in your life have gotten around to recognizing it yet. Brendan spent 3 years convincing Jennifer that I was something less than I was. A financial convenience. A sentimental old man in an outdated house. What he didn't account for was that Jennifer knew me before he did, and somewhere underneath everything he'd layered over that, she still did. When she sat across from me in that office in Whistler and asked how many properties I owned, the look on her face wasn't just surprise. It was something more like grief. For the version of herself that had stopped asking, for all the dinners she'd sat through while he filled the room. And she got smaller to make space for him. I didn't do any of this to humiliate her. I want to be clear about that, even now. What I did because I'd reached the end of what a person can absorb before the absorption starts to look like agreement, before silence becomes complicity, before letting it go one more time becomes letting yourself disappear. The hard part isn't the confrontation. The hard part is everything after, when you have to sit with the fact that love doesn't protect you from being treated carelessly, and that demanding better doesn't make you the villain, even when someone needs you to be one to justify what they've done. Jennifer is doing the work now. I can hear it in how she talks. Slower, more careful, like someone learning to trust their own perception again after a long time of having it corrected. That's what I wanted, not for her to suffer, for her to see clearly. The rest, we're figuring out together. One Sunday at a time.